My name is John Harrison. I am 72 years old and I am a retired architect. To my only son, Michael, I am just a simple old man, a burden he has to take care of in my old age. He and his new wealthy in laws certainly thought so. I know this because I came home a day early from my trip. I found my wife, Mary, crying all alone in our living room. But from the kitchen, I could hear my son laughing. He was laughing loudly with his in laws as they measured my walls, planning to move me and my wife down into the basement. They thought I was finished. They thought I was powerless. They didn't know that the simple old man they were trying to throw away was secretly a multimillionaire. And they didn't know that I had already set the trap for them. Before I continue this story, tell me in the comments where you are listening from. And please like and subscribe if you believe that respect for our elders is non-negotiable. The flight from Boston had been smooth. I decided not to call. At 72, you don't get many chances to surprise the woman you've loved for 48 years. I pictured Mary's face, that slow smile that still made my heart ache. I turned my key in the lock. The house was quiet. Too quiet. "Mary," I called out, dropping my carry-on bag in the foyer. "I'm home, baby." The only answer was a muffled sound from the living room. I walked in and my good mood evaporated. Mary was curled up on the sofa, the one we bought together in 1990. Her shoulders were shaking. She was crying a deep, painful kind of sob that tore right through me. "Mary, honey, what is it? What's wrong?" She jumped, startled. Her eyes were red and swollen. "John, you're not supposed to be home until tomorrow. I took an earlier flight. What happened? Did someone hurt you?" She shook her head, trying to wipe the tears from her face. They're here, John, in the kitchen." I froze. As she said it, another sound cut through the silence of the house. Laughter. It was coming from my kitchen. It was my son Michael, but he wasn't alone. I heard the sharp, aristocratic laugh of his mother-in-law, Elizabeth Thompson. "Who's here?" I asked, though my stomach already knew the answer. Michael Mary whispered as if she were afraid to say their names. "And Sarah and her parents. They just showed up an hour ago. They're measuring." Measuring. The word made no sense. I left Mary on the sofa and walked down the hall. The laughter got louder. They were comfortable. They were happy. While my wife cried 25 feet away, I stood in the doorway of my own kitchen. The scene in front of me felt like a betrayal. Michael, my son, was holding one end of a metal tape measure. His wife Sarah was scribbling notes on a pad, and her parents, Robert and Elizabeth Thompson, were standing by my refrigerator sipping what looked like my good whiskey. "I'm telling you, Robert," Elizabeth said, swirling the glass, "this entire wall has to go. We can knock it out and put a massive Lux marble island right here." Robert Thompson, a man who always looked like he was smelling something bad, nodded. "Good bones, but the whole thing is dated. Look at this cabinetry. Oak. It's pathetic." Sarah laughed. "I know, Daddy. It's awful. But once we get the new appliances in, it'll be fabulous, won't it, Michael?" My son, my 41-year-old son, just nodded, his eyes shining with a greedy light I had never seen before. "It's going to be amazing, honey. Absolutely amazing." "Michael." My voice cut through the air like a razor. Michael dropped the tape measure. It clattered to the tile floor with a loud metallic crash. "Dad?" He went pale. "Dad, what are you doing home?" "Your flight was tomorrow. I live here," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "A better question is, what are you doing and why is your mother crying in the living room?" The Thompsons turned to look at me. There was no surprise in their eyes. No shame, just annoyance, as if I were a servant who had interrupted dinner. "Oh, John, you're back," Elizabeth said, taking a delicate sip of my whiskey. "Don't be so dramatic. Mary is just being emotional. We were just planning the remodel." "My remodel?" I asked. Sarah stepped forward. She was a tall, thin woman who always dressed in sharp angles, and her personality matched. She put her hand on her hip. "Yes, Dad, we're telling you now. Michael and I are moving in." I looked at Michael. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the floor like a child who'd been caught. "Moving in?" "Of course," Sarah said, as if I were slow. "Our apartment is lovely, but it's a rental. This house? Well, it's going to be Michael's anyway. We might as well start making it our own now. It's just practical. I couldn't speak. I looked at the cabinets William, my father, had helped me install. I looked at the floor tiles Mary and I had laid ourselves one weekend back in '97. Sarah continued oblivious. We'll be taking the master bedroom, of course. It has the ensuite. She gestured vaguely toward the hall. You and Mary can move your things down to the guest room in the basement. It's perfectly comfortable. And honestly, at your age, you don't really need all that space, do you? It'll be much more convenient for everyone. The basement. They were going to move me to my own basement. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had designed this house. I had drawn the blueprints myself. I had hammered nails alongside the construction crew. This wasn't just a house. It was my life's work. And they were talking about it like it was a piece of furniture they could just move. Get out. The words were quiet, but they carried weight. Sarah actually laughed. Excuse me, what did you say? I said. I repeated louder this time. Get out of my house. Robert Thompson, who had been silent, stepped forward. He was a man used to authority, a man who ran a hedge fund and looked down on everyone else. Now see here, John, let's not be children. We are family, and we are discussing a practical solution for your situation. My situation, your age, Elizabeth chimed in, setting her glass down. Your limited income. Michael has been very open with us about his finances. We know how much he has to help you out every month. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Michael helped me. I had never taken a dime from my son, not one. We think it's admirable, Elizabeth continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. But it's a burden, and now that he's married to Sarah, we are his family too. We've decided to shoulder that burden. We're going to take over this house. We'll handle the bills. We'll handle the maintenance. And in return, Robert added, you and Mary get a safe place to live downstairs. It's more than fair. I turned to my son. He was still staring at the floor. His silence was his confession. Michael, he flinched. Look at me. Slowly, his eyes met mine. They were filled with shame, guilt, and something ugly. Weakness. Your wife is crying, I said, my voice shaking with a rage so profound it scared me. These people who I have never invited into my home are drinking my liquor and dividing my house like spoils of war. Tell them to get out. Tell them, Michael, now, this was it. The moment of truth. The moment my son would stand up and be the man I raised him to be. Michael looked at me. He looked at Sarah. He looked at her wealthy, powerful parents. And then he broke. Dad, just listen, he pleaded. Just stop making a scene. You're embarrassing me. Embarrassing him. They're right, Dad. He said the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. This house is too much for you. We can help. You're not getting any younger. We worry about you and Mom all the time. This is the best way. The best way, I whispered, to kick me out of my own bedroom. Dad, stop. He finally yelled, his face red. Just stop it. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of worrying about this old house. Tired of worrying about your bills. Tired of pretending we're not all just waiting. This is my house now. Or it will be. Sarah and I are making the decisions. Just accept it. And just like that, the rage was gone. It didn't fade. It vanished. It was replaced by a cold, clear silence in my head. The world sharpened. I saw my son not as the boy I had raised, but as a 41-year-old stranger, a parasite who had just confirmed my deepest, darkest fears. I saw his wife, Sarah, smiling a smug look of victory on her face. I saw her parents looking at me with the detached pity of zookeepers observing an old lion. The son I knew was gone. I see, I said. My voice was perfectly even. I nodded slowly. I turned my back on them. I walked out of the kitchen past my son, who looked confused by my lack of shouting. I walked back into the living room. Mary was still on the sofa looking at me with terrified, hopeful eyes. John, what's happening? I didn't stop. I walked to the coat closet. I took out her winter coat. I walked back to her and held it open. Get your coat, Mary. What? She sniffled. John, what are you doing? We're leaving, I said. My voice was calm. It was the calm of a general who has just seen the entire battlefield and knows exactly where to strike. Michael and the others had followed me into the living room. What are you talking about, Dad? Michael asked, his voice a mix of confusion and irritation. Where are you going? You can't just leave. I helped Mary to her feet, guiding her arms into the sleeves of her coat. She looked at me, her eyes asking 1,000 questions, but she trusted me. She always had. I picked up her small purse from the table. I turned to face my son. I looked at him, at his wife, at her parents. You said you were taking over, I said. You said you were making the decisions now. I walked toward the front door. So take over, I said, pulling the door open. It's all yours. I guided Mary out onto the porch into the cold night air, and I pulled the door shut behind us. The click of the lock was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of an entire life ending and a new one beginning. I didn't call a taxi. I used the black car service I keep on my phone. A dark, spotless luxury SUV pulled up to the curb in less than 3 minutes. Mary was shivering beside me, whether from the cold night air or from the shock I couldn't tell. She looked at the expensive car, then at me, her eyes wide with confusion. John, what are we doing? Where are we going? We're going somewhere safe, Mary. Get in. The driver held the door for her. I gave him the address. The Grand Hotel downtown. Mary didn't speak a single word during the entire ride. She just stared out the window, her reflection showing the tear tracks glistening on her cheeks. When we pulled up under the bright, elegant portico of the hotel, she tensed. John, we can't, she whispered, her voice trembling. This place must cost $600 a night. We don't have this kind of money. It's all right, honey, I said, taking her hand. I walked us to the front desk. The night manager looked up, and his professional smile immediately became one of genuine recognition. Mr. Harrison, it is a pleasure, sir. We weren't expecting you. It was a last-minute decision, Thomas, I said. I need the presidential suite immediately. Of course, sir. Right this way. We'll have your bags sent up. Mary grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my coat. John Mr. Harrison, presidential suite. I just squeezed her hand. Let's get upstairs first, then I promise we will talk. The suite was breathtaking. It was larger than the entire first floor of our house. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the living room, showing the entire city glittering below us like a carpet of diamonds. Mary walked into the center of the room and just stopped. She touched the smooth marble of a side table as if she wasn't sure it was real. John, she said, her voice shaking badly now. I am scared. What is happening? How do they know you here? I took off my coat and laid it carefully on a chair. I sat her down on a plush velvet sofa that probably cost more than our old car. Mary, I need you to just listen for a moment. I have to make a phone call. It is the most important call of our lives. I pulled out my phone. My hands were perfectly steady. The anger from the house had burned away all the shaking, leaving only cold, hard steel. I dialed a number I knew by heart, a number I hadn't called in almost a year. It rang twice in Philadelphia. William Davis speaking. William, it's John Harrison. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. John, it's 4 in the morning here. This must be, is it? It's time, William, I said. A heavy silence stretched across the line. Are you absolutely certain? William's voice was all business now. You know what this means? Clause 5C is the nuclear button. It cannot be undone. It means Michael is. I am certain, I said, my voice flat. He just had his wife and in-laws try to move my wife and me into our own basement. He made his choice. Activate it immediately. I want him cut off by morning. Consider it done, William said. I'll need you and Mary in my office as soon as possible. 10:00 a.m. My team will prepare everything. We'll be there, I said, and hung up. Mary was staring at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. Clause 5C. Cut who off, John? You're frightening me. Who is William? I sat down across from her. I had kept this secret for 45 years to protect her. Now I saw that in protecting her, I had left her defenseless. I owed her the truth. I had owed it to her for decades. William Davis. I began as my attorney. My real attorney, not the local guy we use for our taxes. William is the head of my estate. Your estate, Mary? I said, taking her cold hands in mine. I have not been completely honest with you or with Michael for a very, very long time. I told her everything. I told her about my architectural firm. How when I retired at 58, I didn't just retire. I had sold the firm. More accurately, I had sold my portfolio of structural design patents to an international conglomerate. I didn't just make enough to live on Mary. I confessed the old lie tasting like ash in my mouth. I made a lot. More than I ever knew what to do with. How much, John? She whispered. The initial sale was for $18 million. After taxes, I put $15 million of it into a blind trust. I called it the Harrison Family Trust. Mary let out a small, strangled sound. $15 million. It's grown since then, honey. William manages it. It's closer to $28 million now. But why? She cried, pulling her hands away. It was a cry of betrayal, not of joy. Why would you hide this our life, the budgeting, the old car? Michael? Why? Because of Michael. I said, the sadness of it all finally hitting me. I saw what money did to my partner's kids. It made them soft. It made them entitled. It made them weak. I didn't want that for our boy. I wanted him to work. I wanted him to learn the value of a dollar. I wanted him to be a man, not an heir. So you played poor. I lived simply. I corrected her gently. I gave him everything he needed. His college was paid for by the trust. The down payment on his first apartment. That was the trust. I always told him it was the last of my savings. I truly thought I was teaching him responsibility. I stood up and walked to the window looking down at the city. But I was wrong. I wasn't teaching him responsibility. I was just hiding the target. I made him believe I was weak. I made him believe I was simple. I made him believe I was a burden. And he believed it. Mary was silent, trying to process 25 years of lies, trying to reconcile the man she married with the stranger sitting in this palace of a hotel room. So the house, she finally asked, her voice small. The house they were measuring. The house they are trying to take. I turned to face her. That's the most important part, Mary. The house isn't ours. It never was. What do you mean? I said, feeling the first cold spark of justice. It belongs to the trust. We are just its lifelong tenants. And Michael, he just tried to evict the landlord. The next morning, Mary and I arrived at William Davis's office. Mary was still in the clothes from the night before, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. I, on the other hand, had called the hotel concierge at 7:00 a.m. and had a new $1,500 charcoal gray suit delivered to my room. When I walked out of the bedroom dressed, Mary gasped. She had never seen me in anything that wasn't off the rack. She was finally, after 48 years, beginning to see the man she had married. William's office was not a small, dusty law firm. It was on the 50th floor of the bank tower, a sprawling space of dark wood glass and expensive abstract art. The receptionist didn't even ask for our names. She simply stood as we entered. Mr. Harrison. Mr. Davis is waiting for you in the main conference room. Mary clutched my hand. This was a world she had never known I belonged to. We walked into a room with a 25-foot mahogany table. William stood at the far end overlooking the entire city. He wasn't just the friendly voice on the phone. Dressed in a sharp pinstripe suit, he radiated an aura of absolute power. Good morning, John, Mary, William said, gesturing to the chairs. I apologize for the circumstances, but I am glad you are finally here. We have a lot to cover and very little time. William, what's going on? Mary asked, her voice quiet. John told me about the trust. But why did Michael act like that? It's not just the house. Is it? No, Mary. It's not, William said grimly. He slid a thick spiral-bound report across the table to me. I took the liberty of activating my investigators the moment John mentioned the possibility of activating Clause 5C. What you saw last night was not just disrespect. It was desperation, pure and simple. I opened the report. The first page was a summary of my son's finances. I felt the blood drain from my face. My God, I whispered. What is it? John Mary asked, leaning over. I couldn't speak. I just turned the report so she could see the final number at the bottom of the page. What is $600,000? She asked. That, William said, is the amount of debt your son Michael and his wife Sarah are currently in. But that's impossible, Mary protested. Michael has a wonderful job. He's a marketing director. He makes good money. He told us he makes $120,000 a year, William interrupted, which is a respectable salary. The problem is his wife Sarah spends $250,000 a year. He clicked a remote. The large screen on the wall lit up. It was a spreadsheet credit card statements high-end store. Luxury depth store, a lease payment for a new luxury car that Sarah was driving, mortgage payments on a condo they couldn't afford. They are living a lie, Mary, I said, the pieces clicking into place. A complete suffocating lie. But the Thompsons, Mary said. Sarah's parents, they're rich. Surely they're helping. That's the worst part, William said, clicking to the next slide. The Thompson are rich, yes, but they are also frugal with their own money. They believe in appearances, but not in handouts. They expect Michael as the husband to provide that lifestyle. Michael, in an attempt to keep up with their expectations, has been drowning. He's taken out personal loans. He's maxed out 18 separate credit cards. He is, to put it plainly, about to lose everything. I looked at the numbers at the trips to Vail, the jewelry purchases. This is why they were measuring my kitchen. I said, they need the money for my house. They need it now. It's worse than that, John, William said. His voice dropped and the room felt suddenly colder. What they did yesterday, that was not plan A. That was plan B. Plan A, Mary whispered. William looked at me. John, I didn't want to tell you this unless it became necessary. But 4 months ago, I received a call from the executive manager at the bank that handles the Harrison Trust. He clicked to a new document. It was a scanned copy of an email. 4 months ago, Michael Harrison and his father-in-law, Robert Thompson, scheduled a private meeting with the bank. They brought a lawyer of their own. They petitioned the bank to have the control of the trust's assets frozen. I stood up from my chair. They did what they attempted to have you, John, legally declared mentally incompetent. Mary let out a small, horrified gasp. They presented a file, William continued, full of anecdotal evidence. How you forget things, how you live beneath your means, which they cited as a sign of senile hoarding. How you refuse to manage your own finances, letting them fall into disarray. But we live simply, Mary protested. That was our choice. It was a choice they tried to weaponize against you, William said. They argued that John's refusal to live a life of luxury was proof that he was no longer sound of mind. They wanted the bank to grant Michael emergency signatory power over the trust to protect his father's assets. They wanted the $28 million. I stated, the ice in my veins spreading. They wanted it all, William confirmed. And the bank, of course, laughed them out of the room. The trust is ironclad. It's designed to prevent exactly this. The bank manager knows you personally, John. He knew it was a fraudulent claim, and as per the trust security protocol, he called me immediately. I sat back down, the weight of the betrayal crushing me. This wasn't just a greedy son wanting a bigger house. This was a cold, calculated, premeditated conspiracy. My son had tried to have me locked away, to have my mind legally erased so he could steal his inheritance. So yesterday, Mary said connecting the final piece yesterday was Plan B I finished for her. When they failed to get the trust, they decided to go after the only asset they thought I actually owned, the house. They couldn't get the millions, so they settled for the $500,000 they thought the house was worth. They weren't just moving us to the basement, John, Mary said, her voice now hard as steel. They were moving us out of our lives one way or another. I looked at William. So he did it. He triggered Clause 5C. William Davis smiled. He triggered it the moment he walked into that bank 4 months ago. John Michael is already disinherited. He just doesn't know it yet. Mary's hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was rage. A pure cold rage I had never seen in her. They tried to have you committed, she whispered, her voice low and dangerous. They tried to lock you away. They did, I said, and they failed. So they came for the house. Those vultures, she hissed. John, what does this mean? What happens now? I looked at William. Tell her exactly what Michael just did to himself. William steepled his fingers, looking at Mary with a calm, professional respect. Mary, when John and I set up this trust, he was worried about this exact scenario. He was worried that Michael, surrounded by the wrong influences, might one day see him as a piggy bank rather than a father. So John had me write in a very specific, very punitive clause. We call it Clause 5C. What does it do? Mary asked. We nicknamed it the wolf in sheep's clothing clause, William said. It states that if any primary beneficiary, in this case Michael Harrison, is found to have engaged in any act of willful financial, emotional, or physical harm against the founders John and Mary Harrison, that beneficiary is immediately and permanently disinherited. Mary's eyes widened. Permanently, irrevocably, as if he had never been named in the trust at all, William confirmed. The attempt to have John declared mentally incompetent, an act of profound financial and emotional harm, triggered this clause 4 months ago. And yesterday he added their hostile attempt to take your home and banish you to the basement was the final undeniable nail in his coffin. As of this moment, Michael Harrison has no legal claim to a single penny of the $28 million Harrison family trust. The words hung in the air. $28 million lost. Mary processed this. So what happens to the money to the house? Where does it all go? It goes, William said to the contingent beneficiary, the person John designated to inherit everything in the event of Michael's disqualification. I smiled. Alicia, Mary said, surprised. Your sister's girl, my sister's daughter, I affirmed. The one who works as a public school nurse in Miami, the one who calls us every single Sunday just to check in, the one who still sends you a handmade card for your birthday, Mary. William nodded. I called Alicia this morning. I explained the situation. She was shocked to say the least, but she understands. She is flying in tonight. As of this moment, your niece is the legal heir to the entire estate, including the house at 456 Oak Lane. A heavy silence fell as we absorbed the sheer scale of the shift. Then a slow, cold smile spread across my face. He doesn't know, I whispered. No, William said. He has no idea. He just thinks he's dealing with a tired old man who lives in a house he can steal. They want the house, I said, a plan forming in my mind. They are so desperate for that $500,000. They are willing to destroy our lives for it. So I said, looking at William, let's give it to them. Mary looked at me. John, what are you talking about? The trap? Mary, they set their trap. Now we set ours. William caught on immediately. His eyes lit up. Oh, that is brilliant, John. Diabolical and perfectly legal. What are you two planning? Mary asked, her voice a mix of fear and excitement. William leaned forward. Your family. Mary thinks you are week-old and senile. They think they've won. They think John ran away last night like a scared dog. They are arrogant, greedy, and stupid. We are going to use that arrogance against them. We are going to draft a new document, a transfer of property and care agreement. It will look official, I added. It will say that we, John and Mary Harrison, in our frail state, agree to hand over the deed to the house. In exchange, William continued for Michael and Sarah, assuming all responsibility for our care. They won't be able to sign it fast enough, but the fine print, Mary. The fine print will be a work of art. What will it say? It will say, William beamed that they, Michael and Sarah Harrison, along with their witnesses, Robert and Elizabeth Thompson, do hereby acknowledge and confirm that John and Mary Harrison are in a vulnerable state, suffering from diminished capacity, and are unable to make their own financial and personal decisions. It will state that they are willingly and knowingly assuming control of all assets for this reason. It's not a transfer, it's a confession. A signed, witness, notarized confession of conspiracy and elder abuse. My heart was pounding now, not with fear, but with a cold, righteous fury. It's perfect, I said. They'll be so blinded by the prize they will sign their own death warrant. Let's do it, Mary said, her voice firm. I picked up my phone. My hand was steady. I dialed Michael's number. He answered on the first ring. He must have been staring at his phone, panicking. Dad, where are you? Mom, is she okay? We've been so worried. His voice was a perfect imitation of a concerned son. It made me sick. I let out a long, weary sigh. I made my voice tremble. Michael, Son, I. Dad, what's wrong? Your mother and I were at a lawyer's office. I said, playing the part of a broken, defeated man. We've been talking all night, and maybe you're right, son. I heard a sharp intake of breath on his end. Silence. What do you mean, Dad? He asked, his voice cautious, not daring to hope. We're old, I said, letting my voice crack. Mary is a wreck. I can't fight this anymore. You said you'd take care of us. You said you'd handle everything. The house. It's too much. Oh, Dad, he breathed. The relief in his voice was disgusting. Yes, of course. We'll take care of everything. You're doing the right thing. I promise. Good, I said. Then I need you to come down to the lawyer's office, William Davis in the bank tower. I want to sign the house over to you officially. Let's just get this over with. There was a pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the greed overwhelming any tiny speck of caution. You're serious, he whispered. You'll sign the house over today. Yes, I said. 3 p.m. Bring Sarah and bring her parents. They seem to be involved. I want everyone here as witnesses, so it's all legal. Yes, yes, Dad, absolutely. His voice was bright triumphant. We'll be there 3 p.m. Don't you worry about a thing. We'll take care of you from now on. I know you will, son, I said. I know you will. I hung up the phone. I looked at Mary, her face pale but resolute. I looked at William, who was already dictating the terms of the agreement to his assistant. He's hooked, I said. William smiled. The trap is set. At precisely 3 heures in the afternoon, the heavy glass doors of the conference room swung open. My son Michael and his wife Sarah entered first. They were followed closely by her parents, Robert and Elizabeth Thompson. They were not the same people from the night before. They had gone home showered and dressed for what they clearly believed was their coronation day. Michael wore his most expensive-looking suit, a navy blue one I'm sure was bought on credit. Sarah was in a bright white pantsuit looking like a triumphant CEO about to close a major deal. Elizabeth Thompson was dripping in gold jewelry, her smile sharp and predatory. Robert just looked smug, as if he had personally orchestrated this entire victory. Dad, Michael said, walking over and placing a hand on my shoulder. His hand felt heavy, proprietary. I'm so glad you're seeing reason. This is for the best for everyone. Sarah glided over to Mary. Mother Mary, she said, her voice dripping with fake honey. You look so tired, poor thing. Don't you worry. From now on, we'll handle everything. You won't have to lift a finger. You won't regret this. Let's get this over with, Robert Thompson announced, pulling out a chair at the head of the table as if he owned the place. We have celebratory dinner reservations at 8. William Davis, ever the professional, gestured for them to sit. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. As Mr. Harrison expressed to his son, he and Mrs. Harrison have had a long night of discussion and have come to a significant decision. He slid 4 thick, professionally bound documents across the polished mahogany table. This, William said, is the Care and Property Transfer Agreement. It's a comprehensive document. Sarah's eyes were practically glued to the cover sheet. She was vibrating with impatience. Let me summarize the key points. William continued, his voice a calm legal monotone. The agreement states that Mr. and Mrs. John Harrison, the founders, agree to transfer the full deed and title of the property at 456 Oak Lane to Mr. and Mrs. Michael Harrison. Sarah let out a small, sharp sigh of relief. In exchange, William went on. Mr. and Mrs. Michael Harrison agreed to provide comprehensive lifetime care for the founders. This includes but is not limited to housing, medical supervision, and all financial management. Yes, absolutely, we agree, Sarah said, reaching for the pen in the center of the table. 100%. Where do we sign? William held up a hand. Patience. Mrs. Harrison. We must do this by the book. There are several signature pages. He turned to Robert and Elizabeth. And since you, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, were present during the initial family discussion last night and are here today, we would be grateful if you would sign as official witnesses to this agreement. Witnesses, of course, Robert said, puffing out his chest. Excellent, William said. Your signatures will be on page 9. It's just a standard witness attestation. It verifies that you are present, that you are party to this agreement, and that you can attest to the founder's state of mind. Their state of mind. Elizabeth asked, her smile tightening. Yes, William said smoothly, flipping through the pages. Right here, by signing, you attest that you have personally observed and agree that John and Mary Harrison are now in a state requiring dedicated supervision and are making this decision based on their acknowledged inability to manage their own affairs. Robert and Elizabeth looked at each other and smiled. They thought this was brilliant. They thought this legally cemented their argument that we were senile. Of course, Robert said, nodding. We are happy to attest to that. We've been saying it for months. They are clearly in need of supervision. Wonderful, William said. Then please, let's begin. He passed the first copy to Sarah. She didn't even open it. She flipped directly to the last page and signed her name with a flourish. Michael followed his signature messier, more nervous, but just as fast. They didn't read a single word. They didn't read the clauses confirming their acknowledgement of our diminished capacity. They didn't read the fine print detailing their willingness to assume control. They just signed. Then William passed the next 2 copies to Robert and Elizabeth. They too flipped to page 9 and proudly signed their names as witnesses, legally attesting to our incompetence. Finally, William slid the last copy to me and Mary. I looked at Mary. Her hand was steady. She picked up the heavy, expensive pen. She signed her name. Then I signed mine. William gathered all 4 copies, stacking them neatly. Well, he said, tapping them on the table. That seems to be everything. Sarah stood up, beaming. She clapped her hands together once. Perfect. Well, that's that. Michael, darling, we need to call the contractors. They can start on the master bedroom tomorrow. She turned to me. Dad? Mom will help you start packing your things for the basement as soon as we get home. It will be so much cozier for you down there. Michael looked relieved, as if the weight of the world, or at least $600,000 of it, had been lifted from his shoulders. I let the silence hang for a moment. I watched them bask in their victory. I saw the greed, the relief, the sheer unadulterated arrogance. I let them enjoy it for a full 15 seconds. Then I looked at William. He nodded. Actually, I said, my voice clear and strong, cutting through Sarah's happy chatter, we're not quite finished yet. Sarah's smile faltered. What do you mean we signed everything you did? I agreed. But there's just one small logistical problem with the document you just signed. A minor detail, really. Robert Thompson narrowed his eyes. What detail? I leaned forward. The house. I don't actually own it. Sarah's triumphant, beaming face was a picture of pure greed. Robert Thompson looked smug. He felt he had just successfully brokered the deal of a lifetime, securing his daughter's future by helping to dispose of her inconvenient in-laws. Actually, Mrs. Harrison, you are not quite finished yet, William said. His voice had changed. The friendly, accommodating tone was gone. In its place was a sharp, cold precision. The voice of a lawyer who was no longer negotiating but dictating. Sarah, who was already turning toward the door, stopped. What do you mean we signed the papers? It's done. William said, there is a small technical problem with the care and property transfer agreement you just signed. Robert Thompson let out an impatient, condescending sigh. What problem? It's a standard transfer agreement. I'm a lawyer myself, Davis. Or at least I was. I know how these things work. Do you now? William asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, Robert said dismissively. We checked the county records before we even came here. The property at 456 Oak Lane is registered to John Harrison. He just signed his rights over. It's finished. Let's go. William Davis smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had just watched the wolf walk right into a steel trap. That's where you are fundamentally wrong, Mr. Thompson. You checked the public records. But you didn't, or rather couldn't, check the trust records. You see, Mr. Harrison's name is indeed on that deed, but it's listed only as the trust manager. The air in the room crackled. Michael, who had been looking relieved, now looked confused. What are you talking about? What trust? The actual legal and indisputable owner of that property. William continued, and has been for the past 25 years, is the Harrison Family Trust. The what? Sarah's voice was a high-pitched squeak. The Harrison Family Trust. I said, speaking up for the first time since they had entered. My trust. The one I established in 2010, right after I sold my company. Michael looked at me, his face a mask of total blank confusion. You have a trust. What, like a small bank account for retirement? No, son, I said, leaning forward. Not like a small bank account like all the bank accounts. Elizabeth Thompson let out a short, ugly laugh. A trust? Don't be ridiculous. You live in that sad little house. You drive that 12-year-old car. You're just a retired architect. What could you possibly have in a trust? A few thousand. This is a pathetic waste of our time. I looked at Elizabeth. I let her arrogance, her complete and total misjudgment hang in the air. I let her feel superior for one last glorious second. William, I asked, my voice calm, what is the current valuation of the Harrison Family Trust? William looked down at a different folder, a thick one they had not seen before. As of this morning's market open, Mr. Harrison, the trust's liquid and fixed assets are valued at $28,342,000 and change. The silence that followed was so profound I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. I could hear Mary let out a shaky breath beside me. She knew, but hearing the number said out loud in this room was still a shock. Michael just stared at me. His mouth opened then closed. No sound came out. Robert Thompson's smug, fleshy face dissolved. He looked like he had been physically struck. 28 million. But the most beautiful reaction, the one I will treasure, was Sarah's. Her face went through a rapid series of emotions. First complete confusion, then total disbelief, then a wild, ecstatic, all-consuming joy. Her eyes lit up like a Christmas tree. 28 million, she breathed, looking at Michael, her voice trembling. Baby, we're rich. She actually started to laugh, a high-pitched, hysterical sound that was half sob. He has $28 million. Oh my God, Michael, we're rich. She launched herself at Michael, who was still paralyzed, throwing her arms around his neck. We're rich. We don't need the stupid house. Who cares about the house? We get the trust. She pulled away from him and turned to me, her entire demeanor changing in an instant. The fake honey was gone, replaced by a frantic, desperate, clawing adoration. Dad. Oh, Dad. I mean, John, I knew it. I always knew you were special. I always told Michael, your father is such a dignified man, so wise. I stop. My voice was cold. It cut through her hysterical rambling and stopped her mid-sentence. What? She asked, her smile faltering. You're not rich, I said. He's not rich. You get nothing. She froze. What do you mean, Michael? He's your son. He's the beneficiary. He was, I said. But the agreement, Sarah stammered, pointing frantically at the documents on the table. We signed. We have a deal. Yes, William Davis said, picking up the stack of papers they had so eagerly signed. He held them up. The care and property transfer agreement. Thank you for this. It is an incredibly valuable document. Sarah looked at her father confused. See, it's valuable. Oh, it is, William agreed. But not as a transfer of property. As I said, that part is completely void since John doesn't own the house he was transferring to you. No, this document is valuable. As a confession, Robert Thompson's face went from pale to a sickly gray. He finally understood. A confession, Michael whispered. Yes, I said, looking right at my son. You, your wife, and your in-laws have just signed a legally binding document attested to by witnesses stating that you all believe I am mentally incompetent, that you believe I am suffering from diminished capacity, and that you are conspiring to take control of my assets based on that belief. You just handed me all the proof I will ever need for a court of law. Michael stared at the papers, then at me, and then at William. The color was draining from his face, only to be replaced by a dark, ugly flush of anger. So what? He suddenly shouted, slamming his flat palm on the mahogany table. The sound made Sarah jump and Mary flinched. So what? It's a stupid piece of paper. It's a trick. It doesn't mean anything. He turned his wild eyes on me, his voice pitching higher, cracking with panic. You can't do this. I am your son. I am your only son. I am the beneficiary. That trust, that $28 million, it's mine. You can't just take it away from me. He can't. Right, Robert? Tell them. He was looking at me, but he was pleading to his wife, to his in-laws, trying to reassure them, trying to reassure himself. It's my birthright. You were the beneficiary, Michael, I said. My voice was quiet. The calm in the room seemed to terrify him more than any shouting could. You were the beneficiary right up to 11:15 a.m. on Monday, July 15th, 4 months ago. Michael froze. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? I asked. July 15th, a meeting at the Central Trust Bank. You, your father-in-law, Robert here, and a lawyer from his firm. Does that ring a bell? Michael's face went slack. He looked like he had been shot. How did you know about that, the bank? They said it was a confidential inquiry. They called me. William Davis interjected his voice like ice. The moment you left the building as the administrator of the Harrison Trust, I am legally obligated to investigate any hostile inquiries or attempts to seize control of the assets. Hostile inquiries? Michael stammered, grasping for a defense. I was just asking questions. I was worried about him, about his state. You were not asking questions, Michael, I said, finally standing up. I felt tall. I felt powerful. You were making accusations. You told the board members that I was senile. You told them I was hoarding. You claimed my simple private lifestyle was proof of advanced mental decay and a danger to myself and the estate. You brought a lawyer and you petitioned the board to have me declared mentally incompetent and to grant you emergency signatory power over all $28 million. That William said was a profound tactical error because that singular act of profound willful betrayal triggered Clause 5C. Clause 5C, Sarah whispered, her face ashen. What is Clause 5C? That I said is the part of the trust I prayed to God I would never have to use. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of my son. He was shaking. When I set up this trust, I knew your heart, Michael. I knew it was good, but I also knew your weakness. I knew you were easily influenced. I knew you desperately wanted to be liked by people like them. I gestured to the Thompson, people who only value what things cost. So I had William build a defense mechanism into the very heart of the trust, a fail-safe, a poison pill. We call it the wolf in sheep's clothing clause. Mary, who had been silent, spoke her first word since they had entered. Her voice was cold. Explain it. It states, I said, looking directly into Michael's terrified eyes in very simple, ironclad legal terms, that if the primary beneficiary, Michael Harrison, or any person acting in concert with him like his wife or his in-laws, is found to have committed willful, financial, emotional, or physical harm against me or your mother, that beneficiary is immediately, automatically, and permanently disinherited as if he had never been named in the first place. Permanent, Mary echoed. It was a judgment. The moment you sat in that bank and tried to have me erased from my own life, Michael, I said you erased yourself from my legacy. You get nothing. Not the house, not the savings, not a single penny of the trust, not now, not ever. The words settled in the room like dust. Robert Thompson was the first to react, sputtering, his legal mind grasping for a loophole. This is outrageous. It's coercion. It's a contract of adhesion. It won't stand up in court. We'll fight this. William Davis actually chuckled a cold, dry sound. Fight it with what, Mr. Thompson? It already has stood up. The trust was vetted against this exact challenge by 2 federal courts when it was drafted. It is ironclad. Your client disqualified himself 4 months ago with his own actions. William held up the stack of papers they had just signed. And to make matters worse, he and all of you just signed a full notarized confession admitting to the very acts that disqualify him. The game is over. You lost. And that was when Sarah understood the house was nothing. The $28 million, the fantasy, the entire reason she was in this room, the entire basis of her marriage, it was all gone. It had never been hers. She looked at Michael, her face a mask of pure reptilian hatred. You idiot, she hissed at him. You failed. And then her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed, sliding gracelessly out of her expensive chair and onto the Persian rug in a dead faint. Sarah was still on the floor, propped up on one elbow. Her expensive white pantsuit was smudged with dust from the rug. Robert and Elizabeth Thompson were frozen in their chairs, their faces a sickly shade of gray, looking like statues in a museum of their own arrogance. Michael. My son was the only one moving. He was shaking his head over and over as if he could physically deny the words he had just heard. He ignored his fainted wife. He ignored his stunned in-laws. He only looked at me, his eyes wide with a desperate childish panic. "No," he whispered. "No. If not me, then who?" His voice cracked. "Who gets it? Who gets the house? Who gets everything? It doesn't just disappear, does it?" He looked around the room as if the $28 million was a physical object, a trophy that had been promised to him, and he was terrified it had just vanished. I didn't answer him. I didn't have to. I simply turned my head and nodded to William. "William, I believe our other guest is waiting. Would you please ask her to join us?" William pressed a small button on the conference room intercom. "You can come in now, Alicia." The side door, the one leading to William's private office, opened. A young woman walked in. She was about 35 years old, wearing simple blue nurse's scrubs. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her face was kind but etched with a deep sadness. It was my niece Alicia, my sister's daughter. Michael's head snapped toward her. His confusion instantly curdled into a new raw burning rage. "Alicia, what the hell are you doing here? This is a private family meeting. Get out." On the floor, Sarah had managed to sit up. Her hair was a mess and her makeup was starting to run. She saw Alicia and her face twisted in contempt. "The nurse, what is she doing here? Is she here to check on our blood pressure? Get her out." Alicia stopped a few feet from the table. She looked at Michael, not with anger, but with a profound, steely pity. "Hello, Michael. I'm here because Uncle John and Aunt Mary asked me to be." "She is here." William Davis said, his voice cutting through the tension as the contingent beneficiary of the Harrison Family Trust. Michael just stared. The what?" As of 10:00 a.m. this morning, William continued. "Upon your legal and permanent disqualification under Clause 5C, the status of primary beneficiary was dissolved. As per the trust bylaws, all assets, rights, and titles transfer immediately to the contingent beneficiary, in this case, Ms. Alicia Johnson." William looked at Alicia and nodded. "As of 10:00 a.m. This morning, Alicia is the sole heir to the entire $28 million estate." The silence in the room was absolute. Sarah, still on the floor, made a small choking sound. Robert Thompson looked like he was having a heart attack. Michael just shook his head, a wild, broken laugh escaping his lips. "You're giving it all to her? A part-time nurse from Miami. This is a joke. This is the sickest joke I have ever heard." "It is not a joke," Michael, Alicia said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. She stepped forward and placed a single crisp legal document on the table directly in front of him. It landed with a soft, final thud. "What is this?" Michael whispered, afraid to touch it. "As the new legal administrator for the trust," Alicia said, "which, as you now know, is the sole owner of the property at 456 Oak Lane. This is a formal legal notice of eviction." Sarah scrambled to her feet, her white suit now rumpled and pathetic. "Eviction? You can't evict us. That's our house." "No," Sarah Alicia said, looking her dead in the eye for the first time. "It is my house now, or rather it belongs to the trust which I manage on behalf of my aunt and uncle. You and Michael were living there as guests. Last night you attempted to evict the rightful tenants and move them to the basement. You are no longer guests." She tapped the paper. "This notice gives you and your husband, Michael Harrison, exactly 48 hours to vacate the premises." 48 hours. Michael exploded, finding his voice. "That's insane. We have things there. Our furniture. Our lives are in that house. You have 48 hours to remove your personal movable belongings." Alicia stated, her voice like steel. Anything left in the house after 3 p.m. tomorrow, including your wife's blueprints for her marble island and your father-in-law's tape measure, will be considered abandoned property. It will be immediately liquidated and the proceeds donated to a charity for the elderly. The locks on all doors will be changed at 3:01 p.m. tomorrow. You bitch! Sarah shrieked, and she actually lunged across the table. I would not do that, Mrs. Harrison, William said calmly, stepping directly into her path without even flinching. You are already facing potential criminal charges for conspiracy to commit elder fraud. Adding assault to that list would be, and I use the legal term here, exceptionally stupid. Sarah stopped. Her hand raised her face a mask of ugly, impotent rage. As of this moment, Alicia said, You are all trespassing in this office, and if you set foot on the property at 456 Oak Lane again without my or my aunt and uncle's express written permission, I will have you arrested. Michael ignored her. He ignored everyone. He stumbled past William past the table until he was standing right in front of me. His face was a wreck of tear snot and sweat. He choked out, jabbing a finger toward Alicia. Over me, her why, Dad. I am your son. I'm your blood. She's just your sister's kid. I looked at my son. My heart was heavy. Not with anger anymore, but with a vast, empty sadness. You're right, Michael. I said you're my blood. But she... I turned and gestured to Alicia, who was now standing beside Mary, holding her hand. She is my family. She is the one who calls Mary every Sunday just to talk. She is the one who remembers my birthday, not with a text message, but with a handwritten card. She is the one who, when Mary had her knee surgery 2 years ago, flew in on her own dime and sat by her hospital bed for 4 days, sleeping in a chair without asking for a single thing in return. You are my son, Michael, but she is my family. I looked him in the eye. You are just a disappointment. Robert Thompson. His face a mask of purple rage, finally understood that the game was over. He was a man who detested losing, and he had just been checkmated in front of his entire family. He grabbed his wife Elizabeth by the arm, pulling her roughly to her feet. This is preposterous, he sputtered, yanking his suit jacket straight. A complete farce. We will not stay here to be insulted by this nurse and a senile old man who thinks he's a king. He's right. Elizabeth chimed in frantically, brushing imaginary dust from her expensive silk blouse. We are leaving. Michael, Sarah, get your things. We don't need this charity. We have our own money. We certainly don't need his $28 million. They moved toward the door, a pathetic attempt to regain control to make it seem as if they were rejecting us and not the other way around. Sarah, seeing her parents bluster, began to rally. She grabbed Michael's arm. Let's go, Michael. We'll fight this. We'll sue them. We don't need them. Oh, but I'm afraid you do, Mr. Thompson. William's voice, smooth as glass, cut them off. They stopped their hands just inches from the brass doorknob. Excuse me? Robert sneered, turning slowly. I said, William repeated. I'm afraid you do need them, or rather, you needed his money. Please, sit back down. We haven't finished the presentation. We have nothing more to discuss, Robert growled. On the contrary, William replied, pressing a button on the small remote in his hand. The large projector screen that had been recessed in the ceiling hummed to life, descending silently. You all came here today under the pretense of caring for John and Mary. We are simply trying to understand the full depth of that concern. The screen lit up, displaying a document titled in large bold letters, Liability Report, Harrison, Michael, and Sarah. Michael and Sarah froze. What is this? Michael demanded, his voice rising in panic. You have no right. That's private. It was private, William corrected him, until you made it the trust's business by attempting to defraud it. As the administrator, I have a fiduciary duty to protect the trust from all credible threats. And you, Mr. Harrison, along with your accomplices, have become the most significant threat of all. He aimed the red dot of a laser pointer at the screen. You see, we were deeply curious about why you were so desperate. Why try to have your father committed? Why risk everything for this $500,000 house? The $28 million was the obvious prize, but the house that was a smaller, more desperate move. It implied a severe cash flow problem. William clicked the remote. A long list of credit card accounts filled the screen. American Express Platinum Chase Sapphire Reserve Visa. Like 18 different cards in total. You too, William said, addressing Michael and Sarah directly, are living a spectacular lie. Your combined income before taxes is approximately $120,000 per year. That is none of your business. Sarah snapped, her face pale. It is now, William said, because your combined spending, according to these statements from the last 18 months, was just over $28,000, a deficit of $130,000. But of course, it gets much worse. He clicked again. A new slide showed personal loans, payday advances, and applications for a second mortgage on their condo. Add it all together, William said, his voice echoing in the silent room. Your current unsecured high-interest debt totals $603, $178.45. What? The voice was not Michael's, it was Sarah's. She turned to her husband, her face bone white with a dawning, sickening horror. 600,000, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Michael couldn't look at her. He was staring at the screen at the numbers that represented his total ruin, all of it exposed under the harsh fluorescent lights. You told me it was 150, she shrieked, her voice cracking. You told me it was a single bad business loan. You lied to me. Michael finally looked at her, his face crumbling. I was going to fix it. I just needed one big win, I thought. You thought what Sarah screamed, tears of rage now streaming down her face. You thought you'd steal my father-in-law's house to pay for your... What is this? This, William said helpfully, clicking to the next slide, is a detailed transaction history from 5 different offshore online sports betting sites. It appears, Mr. Harrison, that the vast majority of this debt isn't from buying your wife expensive bags. It's from gambling. You've gambled away nearly $400,000. You never had. Sarah looked like she was going to be physically ill. She backed away from Michael as if he were contaminated. Robert Thompson, however, looked almost relieved. He saw an opening to distance himself. A gambler, he said, his voice dripping with theatrical disgust. My God, Elizabeth, can you believe it? This con artist married our daughter. He played us all. Elizabeth agreed, clutching at her pearls. He was going to drag our poor Sarah down with him. The liar. But that's not entirely true, is it? William said, his voice dangerously soft. Robert and Elizabeth froze. What do you mean? Robert asked. William clicked the remote. The screen changed. Now it read Thompson. Robert and Elizabeth Financial Inquiry. What is this? Elizabeth stammered, her fake indignation vanishing. You have no right to our finances. Again, I do, William said. The moment you signed that document as witnesses to a fraudulent act, you legally made yourselves accomplices in this conspiracy. I had to know why a supposedly wealthy man like you, Robert, would risk his entire reputation on such a flimsy, illegal scheme. Unless, of course, you were just as desperate as your son-in-law. The screen lit up with new data. It seems your boutique hedge fund, Mr. Thompson, isn't doing so well. In fact, it's been under active investigation by the SEC for serious capital irregularities for the last 7 months. Robert Thompson stopped breathing. My investigators found that you have been borrowing heavily from your clients' trust accounts to cover your own catastrophic market losses. William said, You're not just broke, Robert. You're insolvent, and you are about to be indicted. You monster! Elizabeth shrieked, turning on her husband. You told me the business was fine. You said you were a genius. And you... Robert roared back, his face purple. You told me your mother gave you that money. That's not... That's a lie. Oh, isn't it? William said, clicking one last time. And you, Elizabeth, that generous help, you gave your daughter the money for her luxury car, the down payment on the condo that wasn't from your husband's successful business. We traced the transactions. You have been systematically draining your own 85-year-old mother's retirement account without her knowledge. An account, I might add, that she kept at our bank. You common thief. Robert howled at his wife. You're one to talk, you fraud. It all fell apart right there. The screaming, the accusations, the raw, ugly truth of their lives exploding in the middle of William's conference room. It was beautiful. William Davis let them implode for a full minute, a symphony of destruction. Then he cleared his throat. It seems, he said, turning off the screen, plunging the room back into a heavy silence, that you weren't a healthy family trying to help an old man. You were a house of cards already collapsing, and you were all trying to use John and Mary as your foundation. The meeting is over. The heavy silence in the room stretched for a full 15 seconds. It was broken by Sarah. She hadn't fainted. She had been calculating. She slowly, very slowly got to her feet, her face pale, her eyes fixed on my son Michael. "You," she whispered. Her voice was no longer sweet or faked. It was a low reptilian hiss. You lying, worthless fraud." Michael, who was still staring at the blank screen where his $28 million had just vanished, flinched. "What, Sarah? I didn't lie. I thought, you thought," she shrieked, her voice suddenly climbing into a hysterical register that made everyone waz. "You told me your family was old money. You told me your father was modest and eccentric. You told me this house was just the beginning. I was trying to give you what you wanted." Michael yelled back, his desperation finally finding an outlet in anger. "I was trying to keep up. Who was the one who needed the luxury car? Who had to have the condo in the city? Who spent $8,000 on a single handbag last week? Because you told me we could afford it," she screamed, taking a step toward him. Her hands clenched into fists. "I was trying to make it work. I was managing it. Elizabeth Thompson, who had recovered from her own shock, stood up. Her voice was dripping with venom. "You call $600,000 in gambling debts managing it. You are a degenerate, Michael. You married our daughter under false pretenses. You are a common con artist." "Oh, I'm the con artist." Michael laughed, a high, broken, terrible sound. "Your husband is a crook. He's about to be indicted by the SEC. And you," he jabbed a finger at Elizabeth, "you stole from your own 85-year-old mother. You're a pack of hypocrites, a family of vampires." Robert Thompson let out a roar and lunged across the table. "You ungrateful little, I'll kill you, gentlemen." William Davis's voice was not loud, but it cut through the chaos like a whip. He stood between Robert and Michael. "That is enough." The room fell silent again, the air vibrating with raw hatred. "This," William said, gesturing to the four of them with complete disgust, "is a place of business. It is my office. You will not turn it into a whatever this is. The meeting, as I stated before, is over. The trust is secure. The documents are signed. Now I must insist that you take your family disputes elsewhere immediately." Sarah wasn't looking at her parents. She wasn't looking at William. She was just staring at Michael, and I could see the final cold calculations clicking into place behind her eyes. This wasn't just anger anymore. It was grief. But she wasn't grieving the man. She was grieving the money. "So that's it." Michael whispered, his voice hollow. He saw it too. It was always just the money. Sarah, busy gathering her expensive purse, ignored him. "You never loved me," Michael said a little louder. "You loved this." He gestured around the opulent office. "You loved the idea of this, the 28 million. Sarah finally stopped. She turned to face him. Her face was cold, composed, and stripped of all emotion, all the fake love, all the honeyed words. "Well, he was rich," she said, her voice flat. "And you were too stupid to even inherit it correctly. You couldn't even manage that one simple thing right. That was the bullet. I watched my son absorb it. I saw the last spark of the weak, desperate boy who had tried so hard to please her just die." He straightened up. He looked at her, truly looked at her as if for the very first time. "You are a monster," he whispered. Sarah just laughed, a short, ugly, humorless bark. "No, Michael, I'm just practical. And you turned out to be a very, very bad investment." She turned to her parents. "Let's go. I need a drink. I need to call my lawyer." "Wait," Michael said. She turned back, her face a mask of irritation. "What now? Are you going to beg? It won't work." Michael slowly, deliberately held up his left hand. "You forgot this." He twisted the simple gold wedding band off his finger. It was my own father's ring, the one I had given him when he told me he was getting married. He looked at it, then threw it on the polished floor. It skittered across the mahogany and came to rest right at her designer shoes. "I'm divorcing you," he said. Sarah looked down at the ring. Then she looked back at him. She laughed again, that same horrible, brittle laugh. "Divorce me. You can't afford to divorce me, you fool. I'll take—" "Wait." She stopped. The final terrible realization hit her. There's nothing to take." "Exactly," I said from my chair. Sarah's face crumpled. The last shred of her composure shattered into pure, unadulterated fury. She ripped the massive, glittering diamond ring, the one he had bought her with a fraudulent loan, off her own finger. "Fine, mine," she screamed. "You want it? Have it." She didn't throw it on the floor. She threw it directly at his face. Michael ducked, and the ring, worth a fortune he never had, hit the glass conference room wall behind him with a sharp tank. "I would rather go home and live with my criminal parents." She spat, her voice thick with venom, then spend one more second breathing the same air as a broke, pathetic failure like you. She grabbed Elizabeth's arm. "Let's go. I'm calling my lawyer. I want an annulment." Elizabeth, looking completely defeated and 12 years older, let her daughter pull her from the room. Robert Thompson was the last to leave. He didn't look at his wife or daughter. He stopped at the door, turned, and looked right at me. His eyes were cold dead and full of a hatred that was almost tangible. "You," he growled, his voice low. "You enjoyed this. You planned this whole thing, this entire humiliation." "No, Robert," I said, meeting his gaze. "I didn't plan. I just lived my life quietly. You planned. You conspired. You were the ones who were arrogant. I just had a better emergency exit." He stared at me for a long, terrible moment, the promise of future battles hanging in the air between us. Then he turned and followed his family out of the office, pulling the heavy door shut behind him. The sound of the latch clicking into place echoed in the sudden, profound silence. The heavy glass door clicked shut, and the room was plunged into a sudden, thick silence. The echoes of Sarah's screaming and Robert's threats seemed to be sucked out of the room, leaving a vacuum. They were all gone. The Thompsons with their fake wealth and real cruelty. Sarah with her venom and her ambition. They had vanished like a bad dream. The only one left was Michael. He hadn't left. He couldn't. He was a heap on the floor by the conference room door, a 41-year-old man in a rumpled suit sobbing into his hands. He was a man who had just lost his wife, his in-laws, his house, and a $28 million fortune, all in the span of 20 minutes. He was completely, utterly, and finally alone. Mary let out a long, shaky breath and sat down heavily in her chair. Alicia, my niece, moved quietly to stand behind her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "William Davis." My lawyer showed no emotion at all. He walked calmly back to the head of the table. He picked up the signed 12-page care and property transfer agreement, the confession, and tapped it neatly against the table. He placed it carefully into a new, unmarked folder. Michael didn't move. He just knelt on the expensive rug, his shoulders shaking with these awful, gasping, choked sobs. They were the sounds of a child who finally understands far too late that he is in terrible, irreversible trouble. I wanted to feel something, pity, anger, anything, but I just felt empty. I felt a vast, aching sadness for the boy I had raised and the man he had failed to become. I let him cry for a long, heavy minute. He needed to feel the absolute bottom of the pit he had dug for himself. Finally, William cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrison." Michael flinched at the formal name. He slowly, painfully pushed himself up from the floor. His face was a wreck, red and swollen, his suit stained with his own tears. He looked at William, his eyes wild with terror. "Please," Michael whispered. His voice was hoarse. Just let me go. I'll leave. I'll go to a motel. I won't bother you again. I have nothing. It's over." William Davis stared at him, his face impassive. "You are mistaken, Mr. Harrison. You still have a great many things." Michael looked confused. "What?" "You have criminal liabilities," William stated. Michael's head snapped up. What are you talking about?" It's over. It's a family matter, an inheritance thing. You won. You took it all. This was never a meeting about an inheritance. Michael. William said, his voice dropping, becoming the sharp clinical voice of a prosecutor. This was a meeting to finalize the evidence against you. You seem to be under the impression that this ends here. It does not. It ends in a courtroom. Evidence for what? For what? William actually pulled a new yellow legal pad from his briefcase and clicked his pen. Let's list them, shall we? First, he said, conspiracy to commit felony elder fraud. You, your wife, and your in-laws conspired to deprive your parents of their legal property by making fraudulent claims of mental incompetence. He held up the stack of papers. They had all signed a charge to which you have all very helpfully just confessed to in writing with witnesses. Michael began to shake a visible tremor that started in his hands. No, we just thought second. William continued writing on the pad. Attempted wire and bank fraud, a federal offense. 4 months ago, you and Robert Thompson personally petitioned the Central Trust Bank to gain control of the Harrison Trust's assets, making false claims about your father's mental state. The bank's security footage is excellent. The manager's testimony is even better. I was just worried about him, Michael pleaded. Third, William went on, ignoring him. Forgery, attempting to access bank funds using what you believe to be your father's authority. And finally, my personal favorite, felony elder abuse. You intentionally and systematically inflicted profound emotional and mental distress on your parents, both citizens over the age of 65, for the explicit purpose of financial gain in this state that carries a mandatory minimum prison sentence. The word hung in the air, prison. Michael's face went from pale to a sickly greenish white. He wasn't crying anymore. He looked like he was going to be sick. Jail? He whispered, his voice cracking. You're talking about jail. I'm talking about prison. Michael Williams said, his voice like ice. Men like Robert Thompson, white-collar criminals, they get prison. But men like you who gamble away $750,000 and then try to defraud their elderly parents to cover it up, judges are not kind to men like you. Michael's legs buckled and he collapsed back into the nearest chair. He didn't look at William. He didn't look at Mary. He turned his wide, terrified, pleading eyes to me. Dad, he choked out. Dad, please. You wouldn't. He stumbled out of the chair and fell to his knees in front of me. He grabbed the legs of my new suit. Dad, please. You wouldn't send your son to prison. You wouldn't do that. It was Sarah. It was her parents. They put those ideas in my head. They told me it was normal. I was desperate. I love you, Dad. I've always loved you. Please don't do this. I looked down at the 41-year-old man sobbing at my feet. You love me, I repeated. The words felt like gravel in my mouth. You tried to have me declared insane and locked away in a nursing home. Michael, is that what love looks like to you? You stood in my kitchen in my house, and you told me I should just accept being moved to the basement. I didn't. He sobbed. I was scared. You were greedy, I said. And now you are pathetic. You asked me if I would send my son to prison. Let me ask you, would a son try to send his father to a mental asylum? You already have my answer. You gave it to me yourself last night. I looked at William. William, is there a way for him to avoid this? Michael looked up, his face slick with tears, a new desperate hope flooding his eyes. Yes, William said, as I told Mr. Harrison before this meeting, he is conditionally merciful. He is willing to instruct my office not to forward this entire beautiful airtight file to the district attorney's office. Anything, Michael cried, still on his knees. I'll do anything, Dad. I swear anything. On one, William said, very specific set of conditions. They are absolute. They are non-negotiable. Do you understand? Michael nodded frantically. Yes, just tell me. First, William said, you will sign the full and detailed confession of your actions, which my team has already prepared based on the document you signed earlier. Second, you will sign the divorce papers we are drafting right now, citing irreconcilable differences and waiving all claims to any community property present or future. Third, you will agree to a permanent 1,000-meter restraining order against Sarah Thompson and her parents. We must ensure you are never again under their toxic influence. Yes, I'll do it. Michael said, nodding, grabbing at the chance. Is that it? I'll sign it all. I'll do it right now. And fourth, William said, his voice dropping, the most important condition, the one that Mr. Harrison, your father, designed himself. The heavy glass door clicked shut, plunging the room into a sudden thick silence. The echoes of Sarah's screaming and Robert's threats seemed to be sucked out of the room, leaving a vacuum. They were all gone. The Thompsons with their fake wealth and real cruelty. Sarah with her venom and her ambition, they had vanished like a bad dream. The only one left was Michael. He hadn't left. He couldn't. He was a heap on the floor by the conference room door, a 41-year-old man in a rumpled suit sobbing into his hands. He was a man who had just lost his wife, his in-laws, his house, and a $28 million fortune all in the span of 20 minutes. He was completely, utterly, and finally alone. Mary let out a long, shaky breath and sat down heavily in her chair. Alicia, my niece, moved quietly to stand behind her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. William Davis. My lawyer showed no emotion at all. He walked calmly back to the head of the table. He picked up the signed 12-page care and property transfer agreement, the confession, and tapped it neatly against the table. He placed it carefully into a new unmarked folder. Michael didn't move. He just knelt on the expensive rug, his shoulders shaking with these awful, gasping, choked sobs. They were the sounds of a child who finally understands far too late that he is in terrible, irreversible trouble. I wanted to feel something, pity, anger, anything, but I just felt empty. I felt a vast, aching sadness for the boy I had raised and the man he had failed to become. I let him cry for a long, heavy minute. He needed to feel the absolute bottom of the pit that he had dug for himself. Finally, William cleared his throat. Mr. Harrison. Michael flinched at the formal name. He slowly, painfully pushed himself up from the floor. His face was a wreck, red and swollen, his suit stained with his own tears. He looked at William, his eyes wild with terror. Please, Michael whispered. His voice was hoarse. Just let me go. I'll leave. I'll go to a motel. I won't bother you again. I have nothing. It's over. William Davis stared at him, his face impassive. You are mistaken, Mr. Harrison. You still have a great many things. Michael looked confused. What? You have criminal liabilities, William stated. Michael's head snapped up. What are you talking about? It's over. It's a family matter, an inheritance thing. You won. You took it all. This was never a meeting about an inheritance, Michael Williams said, his voice dropping, becoming the sharp clinical voice of a prosecutor. This was a meeting to finalize the evidence against you. You seem to be under the impression that this ends here. It does not. It ends in a courtroom. Evidence for what? For what? William actually pulled a new yellow legal pad from his briefcase and clicked his pen. Let's list them, shall we? First, he said, conspiracy to commit felony elder fraud. You, your wife, and your in-laws conspired to deprive your parents of their legal property by making fraudulent claims of mental incompetence. He held up the stack of papers they had all signed a charge, to which you have all very helpfully just confessed to in writing with witnesses. Michael began to shake a visible tremor that started in his hands. No, we just thought second. William continued writing on the pad. Attempted wire and bank fraud, a federal offense. 4 months ago, you and Robert Thompson personally petitioned the Central Trust Bank to gain control of the Harrison Trust's assets, making false claims about your father's mental state. The bank's security footage is excellent. The manager's testimony is even better. I was just worried about him, Michael pleaded. Third William went on, ignoring him. Forgery, attempting to access bank funds using what you believe to be your father's authority. And finally, my personal favorite felony, elder abuse. You intentionally and systematically inflicted profound emotional and mental distress on your parents, both citizens over the age of 65, for the explicit purpose of financial gain in this state that carries a mandatory minimum prison sentence. The word hung in the air, prison. Michael's face went from pale to a sickly greenish white. He wasn't crying anymore. He looked like he was going to be sick. Jail. He whispered, his voice cracking. You're talking about jail. I'm talking about prison. Michael, William said, his voice like ice. Men like Robert Thompson, white-collar criminals, they get prison. But men like you who gamble away $750,000 and then try to defraud their elderly parents to cover it up, judges are not kind to men like you. Michael's legs buckled and he collapsed back into the nearest chair. He didn't look at William. He didn't look at Mary. He turned his wide, terrified, pleading eyes to me. Dad, he choked out. Dad, please. You wouldn't. He stumbled out of the chair and fell to his knees in front of me. He grabbed the legs of my new suit. Dad, please. You wouldn't send your son to prison. You wouldn't do that. It was Sarah. It was her parents. They put those ideas in my head. They told me it was normal. I was desperate. I love you, Dad. I've always loved you. Please don't do this. I looked down at the 41-year-old man sobbing at my feet. You love me, I repeated. The words felt like gravel in my mouth. You tried to have me declared insane and locked away in a nursing home. Michael, is that what love looks like to you? You stood in my kitchen in my house and you told me I should just accept being moved to the basement. I didn't, he sobbed. I was scared. You were greedy, I said. And now you are pathetic. You asked me if I would send my son to prison. Let me ask you, would a son try to send his father to a mental asylum? You already have my answer. You gave it to me yourself last night. I looked at William. William, is there a way for him to avoid this? Michael looked up, his face slick with tears, a new desperate hope flooding his eyes. Yes, William said. As I told Mr. Harrison before this meeting, he is conditionally merciful. He is willing to instruct my office not to forward this entire beautiful airtight file to the district attorney's office. Anything, Michael cried, still on his knees. I'll do anything, Dad. I swear. Anything. On one, William said, very specific set of conditions. They are absolute. They are non-negotiable. Do you understand? Michael nodded frantically. Yes. Just tell me. First, William said, you will sign the full and detailed confession of your actions, which my team has already prepared based on the document you signed earlier. Second, you will sign the divorce papers we are drafting right now, citing irreconcilable differences and waiving all claims to any community property present or future. Third, you will agree to a permanent 1,000 Urmeter restraining order against Sarah Thompson and her parents. We must ensure you are never again under their toxic influence. Yes. Yes, I'll do it, Michael said, nodding, grabbing at the chance. Is that it? I'll sign it all. I'll do it right now. And fourth, William said, his voice dropping, the most important condition, the one that Mr. Harrison, your father, designed himself. Michael was still on his knees, looking up at William, waiting for the final blow. He was a cornered animal, ready for anything. But before William could speak, Mary held up her hand. Wait. William, just wait. She had been silent, a ghost in the room, absorbing every awful revelation. Now she stood up from her chair. She walked past me, past Alicia, and stood over her son. I expected to see her usual softness. I expected tears, but her face was hard. It was the face of a mother who had been betrayed to her very core. Before we talk about conditions, she said, her voice shaking but clear, I need to know one thing. Michael looked up at her, his face a mess. Mom, anything. Why? She asked. It was the simplest question in the world and the most complicated. Just why we loved you, Mike. We gave you everything. We worked so hard. Your father, he built this legacy, this secret to protect you, and you tried to destroy him. You looked at us, your own parents, and you saw what a burden and obstacle. What did we do? What did I do to make you hate us so much? This question was more devastating than any legal threat. This was his mother asking him how he had become a monster. Michael couldn't answer. He just broke. He buried his face in his hands and his sobs echoed in the silent, expensive room. I don't hate you, he choked out, his voice muffled. You just what Mary demanded, what was more important than us. He looked up, and the truth, the ugly, pathetic truth, finally came pouring out of him. I was ashamed. He yelled the words ripping from his throat. I was always, always ashamed. I frowned, ashamed. Ashamed of what? We gave you a good home. We gave you an education. You don't get it. He cried, looking at me. You never got it. I grew up in that simple house, that humble house. I went to the state university while all my friends went to Yale and Harvard. You were an architect, Dad, but you drove a 12-year-old Honda and fixed your own roof. Mom, you were a homemaker, but you cut coupons and shopped at discount stores. You called it frugal. You called it valuing labor. He laughed that broken, terrible laugh again. You know what they called it, my friends? They called it poor. They called it cheap. So you were ashamed of us. I said, it wasn't a question. And then he continued ignoring me. I met Sarah and her family. Robert, Elizabeth. They had things. They didn't just have money. They had class. They talked about summers in the Cape Cod skiing and St. Moritz clubs that I didn't even know existed. They were better. They are criminals, Alicia said, speaking for the first time. I didn't know that then. Michael screamed at her. I just knew they were everything I wasn't. I wanted to be one of them. I wanted Sarah, and to get her, I had to lie. I told her you were old money. I told her you were eccentric and that you were modest by choice, but that you were secretly loaded. He looked at me, a bitter irony in his eyes. Turns out I wasn't even lying, was I? You were loaded. You just never told me. The lie just got bigger. He went on, his voice dropping to a whisper. I had to buy her the ring. I took out a loan. I had to take her on vacations we couldn't afford. I took out another loan. Then I had to keep up. The condo, the car, the dinners, and the bedding. I thought I could make one big score, just one, pay it all off, live the life I was pretending to have. But you didn't win, I said. I never won, he whispered. I just lost and lost and lost. So you came for us, Mary said, her voice flat. When your lies ran out, you came for us. Michael nodded, his shoulders slumping in total defeat. Sarah's parents were coming to town. They wanted to see the estate. They wanted to meet the eccentric parents. I was trapped. I knew the moment they saw the house, the moment they met you. The jig was up. They would see you just as you were. Simple. And you couldn't have that. I said no, I couldn't. So the plan to declare me incompetent, it was Robert's idea, he said, grabbing at the excuse. He said it was a standard high-end net worth move, that it was estate planning to protect the assets from erratic decisions. I went along with it. I thought if I could just get control of the money, I could fix everything before you even knew it was gone. And when that failed, I pressed. What was the plan last night, Michael? He wouldn't look at me. He looked at the floor. Tell me. It was desperation, he mumbled. Sarah and her parents, they said we had to take control, that you were an obstacle, a burden. They said if we moved in, took charge, showed you that we were the ones in control, you would just give up. Give up, Mary repeated, horrified. You were trying to break our spirits. We were going to sell the house, he admitted. Use the money to pay off the immediate debts. Use a nice facility, a really high-end one. We thought you'd be happier there with people your own age. A facility I said you were going to sell our home, the home I built, and use the money to pay your gambling debts, all while locking us away in a nursing home. He stammered. You were ashamed of us, Michael. I said, the final cold truth settling over us. You were ashamed of our simple life, so you decided to steal it, sell it for parts, and throw us away all to impress a family of thieves and frauds. He had no answer. He just knelt there, the full, ugly, pathetic truth of his life exposed. He was a weak man, a gambler and a liar, who had tried to destroy his own parents out of shame. Michael's confession hung in the air, thick and toxic. He was still kneeling on the floor, a broken 41-year-old man who had just admitted to throwing his entire life away because he was ashamed of us. He was ashamed of our love. Mary, who had been standing over him rigid with a mother's pain, slowly raised her right hand. I saw it coming, but I did nothing to stop it. The sound of her palm connecting with his cheek echoed in the high-sea ceiling room. It was not a gentle tap. It was a hard, sharp slap that snapped Michael's head to the side. That she said, her voice trembling with a fury I had never heard from her in 48 years. That is for making me cry. That is for the terror you put us through. That is for standing in my kitchen and planning to throw your father and me into the basement. Michael didn't even flinch. He just stayed there, his head bowed, the red mark blooming on his cheek. I thought that was it. I thought that was her final judgment. But then she did something that shattered my own resolve. She let out a great shuddering sob, and she knelt on the floor in front of him. She pulled his head to her chest and wrapped her arms around him, holding him as he sobbed. And this she cried, her tears falling into his hair. This is because you are still my son. You are my son. And you are a fool, a terrible, terrible fool. But you are still my son. Michael's composure, the last of his pathetic defenses, completely shattered. He howled. It was a sound of pure, bottomless grief. He clung to his mother, his face buried in her shoulder, and they knelt there together, two halves of a broken heart, crying for the family that he had just destroyed. Alicia turned her back, walking to the window to give them a moment of privacy. William looked at me, his face impassive, but his eyes said, "What now, John?" I let them cry for a full minute. I let the poison out, but this was not the end. This was the beginning of the consequences. I walked over to them. "Mary," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "That's enough." I placed my hand on her shoulder. She looked up at me, her face a mask of tears. "William, Alicia," I said, "please give us a moment. My wife, my son, and me." William nodded. He and Alicia quickly and quietly left the conference room, closing the heavy door behind them, leaving the three of us alone. I looked at Michael, who was still kneeling, and at Mary, who was sitting on the floor beside him. "Get up, Michael," I commanded. He sniffled, wiping his nose on the sleeve of his expensive rumpled suit. He looked like a disobedient child. "Dad." I get up. He slowly, painfully pushed himself to his feet. He stood before me, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped. "You have two paths," I said, my voice cold and hard. "I need you to listen very carefully. William and I have prepared a file. It contains the bank records, the testimony from the bank manager, the audio recordings of your Plan B conversation, and the signed confession that you and your criminal in-laws just gave us. It is enough to send you, Sarah, and both her parents to prison for a very long time. That is path A. You and I and your mother never speak again." Michael's eyes widened in raw terror. "Dad, no. You said there were conditions. I did. I said. And that is path B. You will avoid prison, Michael. You will not face criminal charges from me, but you will pay for what you did. You will pay in a way that you finally understand. And these conditions, they are not negotiable. You will agree to all of them right here, right now, or I will call William back in here, and he will walk that file straight over to the district attorney's office. Am I clear?" "Yes. Yes, Dad. Clear," he said, nodding frantically, his eyes desperate. "Anything. I'll do anything." "Good." I began to pace. "First, you will go into treatment, not just therapy. You are a gambler. You have an addiction. You will check into a 60-day inpatient program, and you will follow it with outpatient meetings for as long as the doctor deems necessary. Am I clear?" "Yes, Dad." "Second, you will find a job. I don't care what it is. You can sweep floors. You can flip burgers. You can drive a truck. You will earn a paycheck with your hands. And with that paycheck, you will begin to pay back the $600,000 you owe, not to me, to the trust. You will pay it back with interest. You will not receive one single penny from me or from your mother or from the trust. Your inheritance is gone forever. Am I clear?" He swallowed hard. The reality of a lifetime of debt of working-class labor was hitting him, but he looked at me at the prison door waiting on the other side, and he nodded. "Yes, I understand. I will." Third, the Thompsons. Sarah, her entire family, you are done with them. William is drafting the divorce papers as we speak. You will sign them. You will file a permanent 1,000 restraining order against all three of them. You will never see them, speak to them, or contact them in any way for the rest of your life. They are poisoned, Michael. They poisoned you and you let them. That ends today. Am I clear? He didn't hesitate. Yes, clear. It's over. I know. Good, I said. I stopped pacing and stood in front of him. And fourth, you will accept your punishment. Michael looked at me, his eyes full of fear. Punishment, I thought. The job, the debt. That's not punishment, son. That's just being a responsible adult. That's just cleaning up your own mess. No, I mean a real punishment, a consequence, a daily reminder of what you did, of who you were willing to become. What is it? He whispered. I let the silence sit for a moment. I looked at Mary. She nodded at me, her face still stained with tears, but her eyes were firm. She was with me. You're going to come home, I said. Michael's face flooded with a relief so profound he almost collapsed. Home. Oh, Dad, thank you, thank you. Don't thank me yet. I cut him off. You are not coming home as our son. You are coming home as our tenant. Alicia is the new owner of the property. She will be your landlady. I can pay rent, he stammered. With my new job. Oh, you'll pay rent, I said. But not in money. You'll pay it in sweat. You are going to live in the basement. His face froze. The basement. The guest room. The one in the basement, the one you and your wife so generously selected for me and your mother. That will be your new home. It's comfortable. It's convenient. It's close to the laundry room. And as you so rightly pointed out, one person doesn't really need all that much space. You will live there. And in exchange for rent, you will be the property's live-in handyman. You will fix the roof, Michael. You'll unclog the drains. You will paint the fences. You will cut the grass. You will learn with your own hands what it takes to maintain the very house you were so ready to steal and sell. You will do that every day until you have paid your debt. Not just to the trust, but to this family. Do you accept these conditions? He stared at me, the full weight of his humiliation, his fall from grace crashing down on him. He had gone from a $28 million heir to a broke divorced gambler sentenced to live in his parents' basement as a handyman. It was as I had intended, a fate worse than prison. It was justice. He looked at his mother. He looked at me. And he gave a single, slow, defeated nod. Yes, Dad, he whispered. I accept. 1 month later, the house at 456 Oak Lane was no longer the same. It was lighter. The oppressive, suffocating tension that had defined our lives for the past few years was gone, replaced by something I hadn't realized I'd missed. The sounds of a normal, happy home. Alicia and her husband James, a kind and steady man who worked as a high school physics teacher, had moved in 2 weeks after that day at William's office. They took the 2 guest rooms on the 2nd floor. Alicia, it turned out, was 7 months pregnant, a fact she had been afraid to share with anyone in the midst of the family chaos. The moment Mary found out, she transformed. The haunted, betrayed woman who had walked out of William's office disappeared, and the mother I had married returned. Her grief over Michael's betrayal was channeled into a new, fierce purpose, preparing for her grandnephew. The house, which had been silent for so long, was now filled with the sounds of Mary and Alicia laughing in the kitchen, arguing over paint swatches for the nursery and baking. God, I had missed the smell of Mary's baking. She hadn't baked for pleasure in years. Now the house constantly smelled of cinnamon, vanilla, and apple pie. Mary and I were back in our master bedroom, our sanctuary. Life was settling into a new rhythm, a better rhythm. Alicia and James insisted on paying for groceries. James, it turned out, was a fantastic gardener and spent his weekends reclaiming the backyard from the weeds. We were a family, a different one than I had planned, but a real one. And then there was Michael. Michael lived in the basement. He had returned from the 60-day inpatient gambling addiction program just last week. He looked thin. The arrogance that had defined him for so long was gone, stripped away, leaving behind a hollow-eyed, quiet man I barely recognized. He had kept his word. He had gotten a job. He was stocking shelves and mixing paint at the local hardware store. Every evening at exactly 7:15, I would hear the side door open and close. I would watch from the kitchen window as my son, my 41-year-old son, walked across the yard to the basement entrance. He was no longer the man in the sharp navy suit. He came home covered in a fine layer of drywall dust, his hair matted with sweat, his fingernails permanently stained with grease and paint. He looked exhausted. He looked broken. But he also looked real. He did not join us for dinner. That was part of the arrangement. His meals were his own responsibility. He ate alone in his basement room. He was a tenant, a handyman. He was serving a sentence. I did not speak to him, and he did not speak to me. We coexisted in the same house, two separate worlds. Mary would look at me, her eyes pleading, asking me to say something to offer some small comfort. But I held firm. This was not a wound that could be healed with a simple "I'm sorry." This was a debt that had to be paid in full with sweat and humility and time. This evening, I was in the kitchen while Mary and Alicia were upstairs. I was pouring myself a glass of water when I heard it. Drip, drip, drip. The sound came from the kitchen sink. A steady, annoying, persistent leak from the faucet I had installed myself 20 years ago. I sighed. I looked at the drip. Then I looked at the clock. 7:13 p.m. I waited. At 7:15 on the dot, I heard the side door. I watched Michael walk past the window, his head down his shoulders slumped, carrying his lunchbox. I dried my hands and walked to the basement door. I opened it and walked down the stairs. The room was clean, sparse. A single bed, neatly made a small desk, a hot plate in the corner. Michael was standing in the middle of the room, just taking off his heavy paint-stained work boots. He froze when he saw me. He looked like a startled animal. "Dad," he said. His voice was horse arrow. The faucet. I said, my voice flat all business. "The one in the kitchen, it's leaking. A seal is probably worn out. I need you to fix it." Michael just looked at me for a second. A flash of the old, arrogant Michael sparked in his eyes. The marketing director who didn't fix things, the man who hired people. I met his gaze unblinking. The spark died. He looked down at his dirty hands. "Okay," he said quietly. I'll need to go back to the store tomorrow. Get a new O-ring set for that model." "Fine," I said. "See that you do. Alicia needs the kitchen for dinner." I turned to leave. I was halfway up the stairs when I stopped. I didn't turn around. "Your mother," I said, my back still to him. "She made that chicken catcher you like. There's a plate saved for you on the stove." I heard a sharp intake of breath from the room below. I waited. I heard a sound, a small choked noise. "Thank you," he whispered. His voice was thick. "Please tell her. Tell her thank you." I stood there for a moment longer, my hand on the railing. I was not ready to forgive him. I was not even close. But I knew what I was seeing. "You're paying your rent, Michael," I said, still not looking at him. "You're getting your hands dirty. You're doing it on your own." I paused, and the final words came out heavy with the weight of everything we had lost, and everything that was still broken for the first time in your life. You're doing it on your own. I walked up the stairs and closed the door, leaving him alone in the basement, with his tools and the dinner his mother had saved for him. The phone rang 2 weeks later. It was William. His voice was crisp, efficient, and held a note of finality. "John, he said I wanted to give you the final update on the Thompson side of things. It's officially over." I was sitting at my kitchen table nursing a cup of coffee. Through the window, I could see Mary and Alicia in the backyard sitting on the porch swing talking animatedly about the baby that was on the way. "What happened, William?" I asked, my voice calm. "Robert Thompson." William Began was arrested by federal agents an hour ago at his golf club right on the 9th hole. I closed my eyes. Justice. The SEC investigation we uncovered was the final nail. William continued he wasn't just borrowing from his clients. John, he was running a full-blown Ponzi scheme. He's looking at 25 years minimum. He's not getting out. I thought of that arrogant, condescending man who had laughed in my face and told me I was irrelevant. He was a man who measured everyone by their bank account. And his, it turned out, was built on pure fantasy. And his wife, Elizabeth Versterast. "Completely wiped out," William replied, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. Every account she had was tied to his fraudulent business. The house has been seized by the feds. The cars are gone. She's currently living in a Motel 6, according to my investigator. She's functionally bankrupt. Worse, William added she had the audacity to try and call my office demanding that the Harrison Trust pay for her legal fees. She claimed she was a victim of my aggressive tactics. "What did you do?" "I sent her a bill," William said flatly. for the emotional distress she caused my clients, Mr. and Mrs. John Harrison. She won't be calling again. The Thompsons, John, are finished socially, financially, and legally. They flew too close to the sun and they got burned. I felt a quiet sense of order settle over me. It wasn't joy, it was just completion. And the daughter, I asked. I couldn't bring myself to say her name. Ah, yes, Sarah. She's been busy, William said. How so? She filed for divorce immediately, just as she had threatened. Her lawyer, a real shark from a downtown firm, filed a motion to seize all of Michael's assets as emergency alimony. She was still convinced, even after everything, that the $28 million was hiding somewhere. She was convinced that we were just playing an elaborate game. What happened? I asked, though I could guess. William actually chuckled a dry, humorless sound. It was anticlimactic. We had Michael submit his last 3 pay stubs from the local hardware store. We provided a notarized copy of his new lease agreement for the basement room. We showed his bank account, which currently has a balance of $178.32. I pictured Sarah's face. Her lawyer, William, said with deep satisfaction, "Quit the case this morning." He cited non-payment of services. It seems Sarah couldn't afford her own shark. She has no job, no skills, and her parents' credit cards are now just useless pieces of plastic. She gets nothing. So she's left with nothing. She's left with exactly what she brought into this family. William confirmed. A bad attitude and a lot of expensive out-of-style clothes. There was a pause. Don't feel too sorry for her, though, William added. My investigator did one last follow-up purely out of professional curiosity. She's already back on the market. She was spotted last night at a gala at the art museum trying to talk to a 95-year-old oil baron. She's hunting for her next victim. I shook my head, a small bitter smile playing on my lips. Some people never learn, William. No, John, he replied. They don't, but we do. And Michael is learning. That, I think, is what matters. His words hung in the air. So William asked, his voice softening. All business concluded. That's the end of it. The Thompsons are gone. Sarah is gone. Michael is paying his dues. The last question is, are you happy, John? After all this, was it worth it? I didn't answer right away. My gaze drifted back out the window. Mary and Alicia were still on the porch swing laughing. In the yard, I could see James Alicia's husband standing next to our old stubborn riding lawnmower. And next to him was Michael. He was covered in grease. The hands were black. He had the mower's engine cover open, and he and James were looking inside. James was pointing at something. Michael listened. He nodded. He wasn't the slick marketing director. He wasn't the arrogant, defeated son. He was just a man learning how to fix something. He was learning how to do the work I had always done. I watched as Michael finally pulled the starter cord. The engine sputtered, choked, and then roared to life. He got on the seat, put it in gear, and slowly, carefully cut the first straight line across the grass. I turned back to the phone. Happy is a complicated word, William, I said. I'm not happy that my son is a broken man. I'm not happy that I had to destroy his life in order to save it. But William prompted gently. But I said, my voice thick. I look out my window, and I see my wife smiling for the first time in years. I see my niece, who is more of a daughter to me than my son ever was, safe and secure in my home. I hear laughter here again. I watch Michael make another pass on the mower, his face set in concentration. And I see a man out there on the lawn. I finished. A man who might one day be worth something. I'm not happy, William, but I'm at peace. And for the first time in a very long time, I'm getting there. I'm getting closer, thanks to you. That's all I needed to hear. John, take care of that family. I will, I said. The real one. I hung up the phone. 7 months had passed since the day in William's office. 7 months since the old toxic order of my family had shattered. Winter had come and gone, and now a cool spring evening was settling over the house. Sunday dinner at 456 Oak Lane had once been a performance, a tense, quiet affair where Mary and I tried to pretend, and Michael and Sarah pretended right back, all of us choking on unspoken resentments and lies. But this was different. The table was set for 5. The air in the dining room wasn't heavy. It was light. It smelled like Mary's roasted chicken and the lemon pound cake Alicia had baked. James, Alicia's husband, was telling a funny story about a student in his physics class who tried to argue that gravity was optional. Mary was laughing a real deep laugh that I hadn't heard in years. She and Alicia were sitting close together. Alicia was 9 months pregnant now, glowing and full of life, and Mary fussed over her constantly, her grief over Michael's betrayal channeled into this new fierce purpose. "I'm telling you, Mary Gay is too sophisticated," Alicia said, pointing with her fork. "Nonsense," Mary countered, her eyes sparkling. "Gray is calming. We can add accents. Yellow ducks. It will be beautiful. We don't want the baby to be overstimulated, do we?" They looked happy. My wife, who had been a ghost in her own home, was alive again. She had a purpose. She was going to be a grandmother in all but blood. And at the far end of the table, sitting in the chair that Robert Thompson had once tried to claim, was Michael. He was quiet. He ate his food, his eyes on his plate. He had been living in the basement for 7 months, working at the hardware store for 6. He looked different. The arrogance that had defined him for so long was gone, stripped away, leaving behind a hollow-eyed, quiet man. His hands told the story. They were no longer the soft hands of a marketing director. They were rough. The knuckles were calloused, the fingernails clean but permanently stained around the edges. They were the hands of a man who worked. He didn't join us for dinner every night, but Sunday was becoming a tradition. It was Alicia who had insisted. "He's part of the household, Uncle John. He does the work. He should eat with the family. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't boast. He didn't pretend. He was just there," Michael James said, pulling him into the conversation. "That fix you did on the attic insulation? Brilliant. Our room is 15 degrees warmer." Michael looked up, surprised to be addressed. "Oh, it was just some fiberglass batting. The old stuff was compressed. I saw a draft by the north-facing eave." "Well, whatever it was," Alicia smiled at him. "It worked. Thank you." Michael just nodded, a slight flush rising on his neck. "You're welcome." He went back to his chicken. He wasn't the center of attention. He wasn't the heir apparent. He was just the man who lived in the basement, the man who fixed things. And for the first time, it seemed like that was enough. After dinner, Mary and Alicia started clearing the plates, arguing over who got the last piece of cake. James went upstairs to read. I did what I always do. I went to the front porch. The air was cool, crisp, the smell of spring elas. I sat in my old rocking chair, the one my own father had built, and looked out at the quiet street. 456 Oak Lane. It was my house again. I heard the screen door cack open and close behind me. It was Michael. He stood awkwardly by the door for a moment, his hands twisting in the pockets of his clean jeans. He looked nervous. "Dad," he said. His voice was quiet. "Michael," I replied, not turning. I just kept rocking. He walked over and stood in front of me, blocking my view of the street. He looked smaller, not diminished, just human. Can I talk to you for a minute? I'm listening." He took a deep breath. His rough hands were shaking slightly as he pulled them from his pockets. In his right hand, he held 2 envelopes. They were standard white business envelopes, slightly crumpled. This is the first one," he said, holding out the first envelope. It was thick. It's the rent for the basement room. I'm 3 days late. I'm sorry. My paycheck didn't clear until this afternoon." I looked at him. I looked at the envelope. His rent, as I had stipulated, was his labor, his work on the house. This was something else. "What is this?" I asked. "Alicia and James. They're having a baby," he stammered, not meeting my eyes. "The work I do, it's fine for the house, but they need money for diapers, for things. It's my paycheck from the hardware store. All of it for this month. It's $400. Please tell Alicia it's for the baby." I held the envelope. $400. The man who gambled away $500,000 was now handing over his entire hard-earned paycheck. "All right," I said, placing it on the small table beside me. "I'll give it to her." And he said, his voice dropping. He held out the second envelope. This one was thin. This is the other thing." I took it. It was lighter. It's not much, he said, his voice full of a shame that was different from before. This wasn't the shame of being poor. This was the shame of being a debtor. It's $80. It's all I could save after the rent. But it's the first one. I frowned. The first what? The first payment, he said, finally meeting my eyes. For the 600,000. I know it's just a drop. I know it will take forever, but it's a start. $80. I'll have another 80 next month. Maybe more if I get overtime. He stood there exposed, offering this pathetic, powerful gesture. I held the small envelope in my hands, $80 against a debt of $750,000. It was nothing. It was a joke, and it was at the same time the most valuable payment I had ever seen. I looked at the envelope, then I looked up at my son. You're right, I said, my voice thick. It's not much. At this rate, it will take you more than 500 years to pay this off, Michael. He flinched, but he didn't look away. He didn't make an excuse. He just stood there and took the truth. I know, sir, he whispered. I slowly, deliberately put the envelope with the $80 into the breast pocket of my shirt right over my heart. All right, I said, patting the pocket. One payment down, a lot more to go. A single tear escaped his eye and rolled down his cheek. He wiped it away angrily with the back of his rough hand. Yes, sir. He stood there for another moment. The faucet in the kitchen. I fixed it. It won't drip anymore. Good, I replied. That's good work. He nodded as if he had just been given the greatest compliment of his life. Good night, Dad. Good night, son. He turned and walked back to the basement door, his shoulders straight. I sat there on the porch for a long time, rocking back and forth in my father's chair. I heard the faint sounds of Mary and Alicia laughing as they washed the dishes. I heard the distant sound of the city. I felt the crisp spring air on my face. William had asked me if I was happy. No, I wasn't happy. Happiness was too simple a word. I had lost my son, the brilliant, arrogant, weak line marketing director. That son was gone forever. I had been forced to destroy him. But as I sat there in the dark, my hand resting on my chest, feeling the small, crinkled envelope in my pocket, I realized that in the wreckage I had found something else. I had found a man who was paying his debts, a man who fixed what was broken, a man who was learning the hard way how to build a life instead of just buying one. I had lost the son I thought I wanted, but I had finally found the man I had always needed him to be. I closed my eyes. The house was quiet. The war was over, and for the first time in my 72 years, my world was finally truly in order. I was at peace. Here's the lesson we can all take from this story. This story teaches us a powerful lesson about the difference between price and value. Michael and the Thompson were obsessed with the price of everything: the house, the cars, the status. But they understood the value of nothing. They mistook John's humility for weakness and his simplicity for poverty. But true wealth isn't about what you can show off. It's about the character you build in private, the integrity you maintain under pressure, and the peace you find in an honest life. Respect, loyalty, and dignity are the only assets that can never be faked, forfeited, or gambled away. What did you think of Michael's path to redemption? And who do you think was the real villain in this story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you like this story and want to hear more, please remember to like and subscribe.